On this edition of the program, Elon Musk's tenuous fate within the MAGA coalition, and he spent 8 years in the belly of the beast of conservative media. Now, for the first time, he is free to say whatever he wants. The cosmic Kevin Ryan explains the entire business and his experience within it. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you from Austin, Texas. This is your Friday, June 6th edition of the Triple P program. We are going to get it out to you a little early, mostly because the things that I'm going to talk about, there might be new developments. We're recording this a little earlier than we normally do on Thursday, getting ready for your Friday episode. We like to have it in the torpedo tube for you to have on your morning commutes, but you might have it on your afternoon return commute on Thursday today because these things tend to move fast. But I do think that there's some larger stuff that we're going to get to. Kevin Ryan, that's a conversation that can happen then, now, forever, always. An awesome time to talk to him, but this is a conversation I've been looking to have with him for our entire friendship. So I met him while he was at the Blaze. He held a couple jobs there. He worked on Glenn Beck's radio show. He worked on the feature writing side. He worked on a new magazine that they had just launched. But we have had high-level conversations as friends for a long time about just conservative media. Where it is, why it exists, and the role of the conservative intellectual, and how we both kind of think that that is something that has gone away. There really is not the same kind of battle nor perch for a conservative intellectual, and we talk a lot about that. And if you want to hear conversation about Jordan Peterson, which would depend on your definition of conversation, we have a lot of it. We're going to get to that. But first, let's talk about what's happening with the One Big Beautiful Bill. First, this from Jake Sherman. This is the latest of what is happening in the Senate right now. Obviously, state of play, but we'll see. It looks like there is a widening gulf between what is going to come out of the Senate and what's going to come out of the House. This, according to Punchbowl's Jake Sherman, who is about as plugged in gets. The White House isn't sold on the Senate Finance Committee's case for making permanent a slate of business tax breaks that would sunset after 5 years in the House bill. Senate Republicans want to put additional limits on several key Trump priorities, including no tax on overtime and a new savings account for kids. And there is no resolution on SALT, which Senate Republicans want to change significantly. We're told Trump didn't object when GOP senators reiterated their desire to water down the House's $40,000 deduction cap. That obviously would make some folks in the House happy because SALT was very controversial there. It would not make the SALT caucus happy, who fought very hard to get that number from 10,000 to 40,000. That is where the actual bill is. And that's actually what's going to get pushed through the Senate parliamentarian. And then we're going to see what the Senate does. And then we're going to see what the House does. And this is going to pass somewhere, either the two big animating finish lines for this, which is the only thing that you should judge Congress on, is when they are going to be forced to do a thing, is either the end of June, so the end of this month, or end of August. So it's either going to be done now, it's going to be going, the changes that are made now are going to be the things that actually happen, or you 3 more months, and then it's going to be the end of the August recess, and that's when it's going to happen. And I got to say, everything was on a pretty smooth track, at least through my amateur eyes. Okay? I know a lot more about elections than I do about governing. I've never been shy about telling you guys that. But I didn't hear a lot of people bitching. And the people that were bitching the loudest were people like Rand Paul. And even Rand Paul was like, look, I'm going to vote for it. Just take out the debt ceiling thing. We had conversation yesterday that Trump and Elizabeth Warren, of all people, might be willing to do a separate bill that would just eliminate the debt ceiling. Who knows if that will happen, but a lot of stuff going on. MAGA world is united against Rand Paul right now. So I'm going to take a wild guess and say that they're going to try to get him either on board or they want to punish him for standing outside in the rain because he's the only guy who's really talking about it. But I want to talk really quick about the MAGA coalition in relation to Elon Musk. And to do that, I need to talk about specifically where the MAGA coalition gathers and what it is. I would define the MAGA coalition as influencers and organizations that have supported Donald Trump from either the jump or are zealous converts that have gotten on the Trump train. There is no place that they all gather more than X, formerly Twitter. And I will say that Elon Musk is somebody that has never really fit into the MAGA coalition until about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago when he bought Twitter. He was somebody that initially was Trump adjacent in the first term. He was a part of a few boards. Then he quit the boards when the Paris Climate Accords were quit. Then obviously he spends some time in the wilderness under the Joe Biden administration. The Biden administration doesn't like him because he doesn't run a union shop with Tesla. But Elon does like some of the EV credits. So, he's kind of half and half. And then everything explodes. He gets super culture war pilled. He buys Twitter. And now we're off to the races. Next thing you know, you see his alabaster white belly as he's leaping in exultation in Butler, Pennsylvania, because he is Trump's number one boy, dark MAGA in that. But now, Elon Musk is very, very critical of this one big, beautiful bill. The one big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump and Speaker Johnson have crafted fairly meticulously and have, through blood, sweat, and tears, gotten to the level that it has gotten now. And so you have a few questions here, some of which we're not going to talk a lot about, including why Elon is so mad about this in particular. You can say it's because it does strip out some of those EV mandates. You can say that he's really mad about a law for AI regulation, something that he has pushed because he is very mad that he is not leading the AI race. Wall Street Journal reported that Donald Trump sacked his preferred NASA pick. Okay. Or maybe it's just personal beef. Steve Bannon says on his War Room podcast that there was a physical altercation between Musk and Scott Bessent. Which, look, if Musk didn't want to actually have a physical fight with Mark Zuckerberg, picking on a 62-year-old Treasury Secretary, maybe that would be the next weight class. But Bannon, to get back to the MAGA ecosystem, is a grand poobah of that world. When Steve Bannon talks, MAGA listens. And so it's been very interesting since Elon came out 2 days ago, said that the big, beautiful bill is a disgusting abomination. The next day he came out and said outright, kill the bill, retweeting Rand Paul. I've been very curious to see how MAGA world would react. Because aside from Steve Bannon, who hates Elon, MAGA world has been pretty friendly to Elon. They were very happy to have somebody who is that rich, that culture war outspoken, and that partisan when it came to Donald Trump to be on the team. Some conservative influencers even had his baby, although they're not too happy about it now. But I've been keeping my eye. This is why I do for you, okay? When I'm doom scrolling, I'm not just wasting my life. I'm paying attention for you. So all of a sudden, I start to notice things. Here's a big domino that falls. Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk of Turning Point Action. He comes out and he says, here's our 50 things that the big, beautiful bill does that are cornerstones of the MAGA agenda. Ooh. Big. Doesn't attack Elon, just starts talking up the bill. Had not been doing that before. You know, he was keeping his powder dry. Cat turd. And look, if you're not plugged into the fact that Cat Turd 2, the Twitter account, has political power, well, that's why you listen to this show. Cat Turd 2 is just a guy, but he's a guy who tweets a lot. He's a former musician in the panhandle of Florida that just likes to tweet. And he has gotten the attention of a lot of conservatives. When Cat Turd goes after you, it does mean something in this very weird, bizarre political meta that we are in right now. Cat Turd, who is no fan of Speaker Mike Johnson or the Congress, he believes in the big, beautiful bill. Mike Cernovich, a rabble-rouser, somebody who has been very much face first into a lot of conservative brouhaha on social media, documentarian. Now he sells, I think, protein powder. Somebody that has been huge on the Elon train. Big Elon supporter. In fact, has gone very hard on a lot of Elon's enemies, including Sam Altman from OpenAI. That is a thing that you do if you are very aligned with not just conservative interests, not just Republican interests, Elon interests. Like Cernovich comes out on Twitter and says, hey, look, I appreciate Elon wanting to eliminate spending, but Donald Trump didn't get thunderous applause and cheers for saying that he was going to eliminate deficits. He came out to thunderous applause and cheers for a lot of things that are in that bill. Cernovich turning away from Elon Musk. And it has led me to this one inescapable thought. Last one in, first one out. Everybody that I just listed have been a part of that MAGA coalition for years. Years. Many since 2016, right up at the top. They have not wavered. They have not had any questions when it comes to Trump. Now, they have trashed the Congress. They have trashed other Republican politicians. In fact, that might be the only thing that Elon is now getting the hang of, is just trash other Republican politicians because MAGA loves it. But when it comes to the machine, when it comes to the coalition, the loose confederation of all those dots in the sky that I just named and so many others, Elon, they don't love you like that. They just don't. If you want MAGA to side with Rand Paul over Donald Trump in this or anything, It just ain't going to happen. So one of the things that we don't know is what's going to happen on a call between Speaker Mike Johnson and Elon today. Are we going to see any kind of Elon will come in to one of the meetings to help craft things out? You know, does he feel a little bit more safe and secure with that? Does he get a talking to? I mean, one of the things that Mike Johnson is going to tell him, or Russ Vaught is going to tell him, or Stephen Miller is going to tell him from the White House is the number that you are pointing to, that this explodes the deficit, is the Congressional Budget Office saying that there's going to be money lost if we codify the tax cuts that are in now. Do you believe that if we just extend the way that we are spending things now, or taxing things now, that we lose anything? Or are we just on the exact same baseline that we are right now? If so, maybe you should stop yelling and screaming that we are adding $3 trillion to the deficit. Will he listen? Who knows? But we don't know that. All we know is that Mr. SpaceX seems to be orbiting the MAGA ecosystem, slowly getting farther and farther away. Oh, before we start going, is there anything that you can't say? Is there any restrictions on anything that I should avoid?
Hey, dude, let's just do it. Let's do the honest version. I can finally do the fully honest version.
Good. Okay. I would like to welcome to the program the one, the only Kevin Ryan. Welcome to the show, sir.
Good to be here, dude.
Well, you want to know what? I actually will leave in the part where I asked Kevin whether or not we could talk about anything. And he said it's the honest version. Here's what the honest version is about. Here's what the honest version is about. Kevin, how long were you a part of the conservative media industrial complex at The Blaze? How long were you there?
I was there for 8 years.
And what I want to get here is just a general understanding of, I think, the media at that time, conservative media at that time, and your sense of kind of how that process works. I don't think this is any way necessarily going to be a negative thing, but I think Kevin is going to be honest about it. And that's what, now that you are outside of the machine, I was curious to just sort of pick your brain. And so let me ask you, we'll start here. From 8 years ago when you started at The Blaze to when you left, what was the biggest thing that changed about conservative media? What was the biggest thing that you saw evolve?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I started, my mission was I was sort of like like the land rush in Oklahoma. I was like, I staked a claim pretty early.
Yeah.
And the claim that I staked was culture writing in conservative media. That was my specialty. That's what I trained for. That's what I enjoyed the most, and what a lot of people told me this is what I'm best at.
Yeah.
So at the time there wasn't any of that. I mean, Fox News was doing culture writing, but it was essentially, it was close to the New York Post level of culture writing.
Which, yeah, if we're gonna get specific here into the world of writing and stuff like that, there's longer form things and there's shorter form things. And so what you would see in the Post or Fox News is, the kind of culture war reporting that you sort of know. So it's, this thing happened. Maybe we talked to 2 or 3 people that we're going to base the story around. But other than that, it's not a like long form meditation on it.
Yeah, the long form just didn't exist on in conservative media. And that's like you said, it's very similar to what Harper's model was sort of what I wanted to bring to conservative media. And that's essentially like Tyler Cardin the CEO of the Blaze
Yeah.
read my writing in the Dallas Observer and said, which was a lot of feature writing, music writing, and he had me come in for an interview, and we talked for like 2 hours, and he made it very clear that that's what he wanted. And he always lived up to that and gave me the room to like pursue that creativity and to write in the way that I was comfortable and that I was used to. And so, in all that, we had the profile series with Peterson, the election series, which is where you and I met.
Yeah.
And then,
you first came onto my radar. You first came onto the show because you did the article on Kanye bringing Sunday service to the Osteen Church in Houston, and that I really liked that writing. I thought that you were kind of dead on in terms of the cultural understanding of why that was a moment that mattered, and I was glad somebody went out and covered it. But why did you think even at that moment that there was an opening for that? And then, considering you put time and effort into it, I know from my perspective, it did not find the kind of audience that I would have wanted it to find, considering how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was?
So I should add that the Kanye piece was actually part of the election series. So that was when I had my White House press pass, which essentially entitled me to any political event in the entire country. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but Joel Osteen, I connected with Joel Osteen's team, and they were super big Blaze fans. And when I got there to the church, those White House press passes they give you anytime you go to a White House event. And, at the time I had like a stack of them. So it was like their PR, Joel Osteen's PR person, I was like, here you go. I gave her one of those. And she, after I gave her that for the Kanye interview, she moved me to the very front of the line.
Gotcha.
So Kanye had to walk past, all these other journalists and went straight to me. And that was like, at the time that was, one of that and encountering Peterson for the first time at the height of his sanity and career was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
But
how would you define career?
What is what? Which is something I'd like to talk to you eventually about in this interview. Just like the collapse of like Peterson as this like conservative intellectual. But sorry, let me answer the first question, which was how did it change? So
how did it change?
That was the beginning. That was 2008. Or I'm sorry, not 2008. 2015, basically up to about 2021, which is when my White House press pass was revoked because of a certain date in January.
There was a change in president. Yeah, change in management. Yeah.
Yeah. So it changed in that there was suddenly like a presence of people who I thought were like-minded, but turned out to be just a different version of like what we could call the conservative intellectual. And, so we have, a literary magazine. I started working on the Blaze, and my culture writing, which, I put everything into, and it just, it really never caught on. It like, I did have an audience, but every story was paywalled. Which is how things are done.
That's how you make money, especially on a site like that. That was their point. Their point forever has been, pay us money, you will have riches beyond your imagination, beyond the paywall, and we will continue to add to this hoard to entice you to jump over. There are many different ways that you can look at that bargaining structure, and I have my own philosophy with it, at least for the stuff that I do, where I tend to believe that you should be giving away about 80% of the stuff, especially the stuff that's going to bond with your audience. You want to give 80% of that away. And the people that believe in you by way of creating a relationship will jump over for 10%, for 20% of stuff that is exclusive. But the Blaze has always operated on more of a gated paywall model. And I think largely because their biggest exposure is Glenn Beck's radio show, which does go out free to a lot of people. So that's their feeder. Their feeder is, are you tuning in to Glenn Beck's radio show? If you are, then here is this treasure trove of other stuff and other podcasts and yada, yada, yada.
Yes. And you know, I actually wrote for the radio show for 6 years while I was doing all the, you know, all this creative nonfiction.
So you were obviously valued highly as a writer by the company if you were given the opportunity to write on their flagship program.
Yes. And the difference that happened in 2024, they moved me over to the Blaze full time because they had started a culture vertical and, you know, a couple other verticals that they were trying. And that was going to justify the paywall fully. So it's like, you know, if you have total access, you know, so basically that was the trick. You know, I was writing exclusively for the Blaze, but like everything I did for the most part was behind a paywall. So that was, and I remember you texting me late one night, and it was this beautiful conversation we had where you're like, dude, you're in your prime. You're like, you don't need to be behind a paywall. You need to be out there doing what you want. I mean, this is when you do it.
Connecting with people. You need to make a connection. And that is very hard to do behind any paywall, even a paywall that you set yourself. It is hard to meet the people out in the digital streets and have them say, oh, I get you. I like you. You know, you're only giving a glimpse, a flash, a glimmer. And we are in a very competitive media environment where, you know, I think you need to be, you know, you need to be on a few dates. You need to put out before somebody's going to start paying out. That's what I would say for my personal journey through all this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's what I'm doing that largely with your help with, you know, I've got Substack, but I'm officially launching my Substack Tuesday, and it's very much what I've always wanted to do. So it will
already be out by the time that this airs. So go ahead and sign up for Kevin's Substack. And I think a lot of what you're going to be doing is stuff that you were there, were there before. And this kind of gets us to the conversation behind the conversation. And I know for some people, anytime I talk about media is a time that they want to hit the fast forward button. So we're going to kind of pivot a little bit to something that Kevin talked about, which is the collapse of the idea of the conservative intellectual. And that is a larger topic that I have found fascinating as I have been an observer of conservative media, where your most popular people, I mean, from my point of view, you've got like these titans, these like Mount Rushmores of what you would imagine to be conservative media. And they are very varied, but you have this kind of William F. Buckley image, which is very much the idea of a intellectual who is, they are studied, they are the adults in the room, and they are the answer to this rise of counterculture and liberalism that is attractive to the adults.
Yeah.
And then you have a figure like Rush Limbaugh, who, to those who listen to him, understand that he very much wanted to steer into that intellectual lane, but was never above. He was an entertainer first. He wanted to have that connection with his audience, but he never shied away from the idea that he was the super big brain guy. And so even as he's Wile E. Coyote, like pointing to his head in a cartoonish, almost professional wrestling manner, that is the secret sauce that made him what he was, is that the super serious needed to listen to him. But also if you just didn't know anything but oppositional hatred for Democrats, you had to listen to him because he was going to feed everybody. And it seems like we are in this very weird wilderness where there's no natural there's no natural place for a conservative intellectual in the same kind of way, especially since we have this realignment where a lot of the people that used to take up those jobs, those positions in media are all never Trump. So we're like 8 years away and a full realignment movement away where there's not a whole lot of conservative intellectuals that are saying, here's why I believe in this movement. Here's why I believe in the movement now. And I'm sure for a lot of the audience, your answer is going to be, well, Tommy, this is because Donald Trump's an idiot. And so there can't be any conservative, there can't be any intellectual thing, which that's your opinion. That's fine.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, that's never stopped anybody before in the world of politics from creating an intellectual justification for things. And so from your perspective in the middle of it, what are your thoughts on that?
So to answer the last part first, the presence of Trump should be inspiring, for anybody, but especially for the people who think he has nothing to offer, because I think that is one of the tasks of the so-called intellectual is to just the spectacle of Trump alone.
Find the meaning.
Yeah. But what does Trump mean? I think this was a question. This was another question you texted me last night. This must have been several years ago, and it was such a good question that I really spent a lot of time and I wrote about it a lot. But I was still in the middle of this machine, and so I couldn't. And they didn't want to publish those pieces, which is the cool thing about Substack is what I'm publishing are stories that were rejected. Some of them are like fully edited, but what happened? And here's an important distinction. This is the paradox at the center of any discussion about the conservative intellectual, which is based on the most recent definition of intellectual, which has, kind of a Marxist infusion. There is no such thing as a conservative intellectual because conservatives are like supposed to despise and attack the very notion of an intellectual at all.
Free thought and scholarship.
Well, what's funny is they don't mind that. But what they don't like is the label intellectual. So they want to, a very small group wants to engage in intellectual pursuits, which are, tinged with media analysis, politics, academic pursuits. It's there, but they dislike the idea of the intellectual, except for people like Jordan Peterson. I think Peterson was the anomaly. I think he was sort of the reigning king of, the conservative intellectual for a while. But then he just sort of fell apart. And now we're back in this kind of gloom, or conservative media is back in this gloom. And there is a conservative intellectual. They do exist, but they're horrible. They're terrible. And so this is me spilling the tea. This is some tea. When
you say horrible, what do you mean by horrible? Horrible people, horrible ideas. What do you get?
Both. Yeah, both of it. And like horrible, I've spent a lot of time around intellectuals, and I've spent a lot of time around intellectuals on the left. And you can't have a conversation with any conservative about the beauty of the Oxen of the Sun chapter of Ulysses. You can't talk about it. You can't even talk about conservative figures. Like, you can't really talk about Yeats. You can't talk about different philosophers. At one point, the Blaze is like, dude, we don't want to hear about Rene Girard. We want, and it was essentially like, okay, this is just culture war stuff. And there's no, there should be like a meandering, lingering, possibly flowery aspect to an intellectual pursuit that takes the form of creative.
It feels like there is a version of that in amongst people that for much of their lives describe themselves as conservatism, but it's all 4,000 word essays about how, no, this time I've cracked the code, Trump is Hitler. Like it's all just different intellectual justifications for authoritarianism and, you know, a lot of anger for people that no longer have jobs in positions that they thought they were going to have jobs in forever. And it's hard to take away that framing to it, at least for me, which is, it makes it all the more frustrating that it's like, if I'm trying to eat my Wheaties and I'm trying to just get a lot of samplings of ideas on where things are. And this is where, you know, for example, the tariff stuff have driven me up a wall, just even trying to get any kind of bearings on it, because everybody that I trusted on the right economically that would normally explain a president's actions are all kind of market libertarians who hate tariffs. So it's like you have the Democratic side that's like, well, anything that Donald Trump is going to do. The liberal side, anything that Donald Trump does is awful. Even the left that loved tariffs and talked about how tariffs was the greatest thing ever. Like they're like, yeah, but not this. This sucks. This is terrible. It's like, okay, so how would you have done it different? They're not going to talk about that. Then there's the baseline Democratic idea. And then there's the right that's like, oh, we hate tariffs too. And then it's like, all right, that's fine. I'm willing to, as I'm just trying to be a guy who understands this stuff, I'm willing to settle on the thing that these are all bad. But can I get one person? I've had a hard time getting people on this show. I've wanted to have somebody on this show that just is like, hey, this is good, because I found some voices that are like, well, you know, when you look at it, if it's a higher tariff import, but fuel costs come down and this happens, and you can kind of get the best of both worlds, that you are going to do, you know, incremental reshoring, but you're not going to see inflation jump in the same kind of way because blah, blah, blah. But I can't get anybody on the show to say it because they just don't. It's hard to find those voices, let alone a compelling voice, let alone an interesting guest. And that's where there's just this void right now where conservative media is about as popular as it's ever been, if you probably look at the numbers and eyeballs. And yet it's kind of living off its own ecosystem. It's like its sewage is becoming its water, which is like, it's fine. It's good for what it is, but there's not really, I don't know. There's just something missing. And it's one of the things that we've talked the most about.
Yeah. And for the record, I am not the tariff guy, if you're ever looking for a tariff guest, but I'll tell you how I would do it if I were still in a position, if I were still at the Blaze. I would tell stories. And that's what's really lacking. I would find, you know, a worker at Target who is going through the effects of you know, any number of people, and tell their story, and then weave in the philosophical elements, the political elements, and also be obvious, or be like open about like, hey, I really don't know. I don't really understand tariffs. And this is like, I think that's part of what's been going on. Cause you know, I've been writing and doing production for Bridget Fetty's Dumpster Fire, which has been a blast, dude. It's been so much fun. But during the early part of the tariff news cycle, you know, Bridge is so great about like, look, this is what I think the situation is. And for her, that was, you know, I really don't understand enough about this to talk about it. I'm interested in it. I want to learn more, but it's just such a, like, it's a field of landmines.
Yes. Well, and I think she's somebody that I've respected in the media world, mostly because she shares my tenet of like, if you're not dead sure on something, just don't get over your skis. Like, it's pretty easy, and it's easy to lose yourself in the woods in this media environment where everybody needs to say the thing. At, you know, there's a great account that just has the same gif of Indiana Jones swapping the idol for a grain of sand. But instead of Indiana Jones, it's the NPC meme head. And the things that he's swapping is the last big topic and the new big topic, right? And so it's like
expertise.
It's like a tariff expert is being replaced by, Ukrainian drone expert or whatever, but it feels like that. And the only thing that I've always done for my audience that has been nice enough to support me, listen to me, and oftentimes pay me is that when I have an opinion, I'm either going to qualify it with where I believe my blind spots are, where I do and don't know things, but I'm not going to jump in and start screaming about the thing of the moment unless I really do feel passion for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the many reasons I love you and I love the work that you do is that we need more of that. We need like just sort of, okay, guys, let's slow down. Yes. And let's look at this before it, because you might not need to get worked up at all. It's like, and I like that that's one of your primary goals. Like, okay, guys, let's really analyze this from a perspective that removes all of these spectacular invasions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's important. And that was what I always wanted to do, but from a creative storytelling perspective that brought, my literary background and all that.
This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. 2 bonus episodes each and every week. That's what you get. Rain or shine. We're always happy to do it. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. President Donald Trump issued a sweeping travel ban on Wednesday, fully restricting entry from 12 countries, including Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia, and Venezuela, and partially restricting visitors from 7 others. The policy, announced in a presidential proclamation, is said to be prompted by national security concerns that have drawn criticism for fostering division and targeting vulnerable communities. Notably, an exemption allows athletes involved in global events like the World Cup and the Olympics to enter the U.S. Venezuela has strongly condemned the move, calling the U.S. unsafe and fascist, while Somalia expressed willingness to engage with the U.S. on security issues. The reason why Donald Trump put this in was in response to the attack in Boulder, Colorado, which has now been designated a hate crime by the federal government, where a man screaming, kill the Zionist, burned a bunch of elderly Jews that were marching in support of the freeing of the hostages, the last of the hostages in Gaza. Obviously, there's a lot of echoes here to what Donald Trump did in the first term of his presidency with his travel ban. Look, the Boulder situation is what it is. I think that that is a cultural issue. The problem is that the man who did it was from Egypt, which, by the way, is not on this list. He had overstayed a tourist visa, still got a work permit. This is under Biden, and then has now applied for asylum. Spoiler alert, dog, you're not getting it. There's a question about whether or not his family's going to get deported, but that's not this story. I think that Boulder situation is a cultural issue. Now, there is a larger issue when we talk about illegal migration into the United States. Before we had the problem that we had on the southern border with asylum abuse, what I think is asylum abuse. You had the largest way that people would actually overstay or become illegal immigrants in this country, which is overstaying tourist visas or overstaying student visas. So, like many things that the Trump administration does, there is a kernel of understandable a problem here. The implementation of their solution, which is what will get 99% of the coverage, is questionable. right? You know, I still remember one of my favorite political ads of all time because of its absurdity was one of Donald Trump's first political ads where he said that he was going to suspend all immigration until we can find out what's going on. Not exactly. Very plain spoken language. Not exactly the language of a politician for whom would have, you know, we're going to seal off migration until we correctly vet or institute my 12-point plan to do, blah, blah. Nope, till we find out what the hell's going on. And so what the White House is alleging with all of these countries is that we cannot properly vet people coming into this country from those countries. And so we're just going to not allow anybody in. Now, does that mean that that is just a point of departure thing? Does that mean that that is a, nobody who's a citizen from those countries can get in? That's obviously a lot of stuff that's going to be decided going down the road because these things don't usually come in fully baked. So we'll keep an eye on it. Karine Jean-Pierre, remember her, former press secretary? She came in after Jen Psaki in the Biden administration. Well, she got her fingers a-writing, or she got a ghost to do it. She's got a forthcoming memoir, Independent. A look inside a broken White House outside the party lines. She says it will offer a candid critique of her tenure as White House press secretary under President Biden. It's scheduled for release in October of this year. And the book delves into the internal dynamics that led to Biden's decision to not seek re-election, highlighting what Jean-Pierre describes as a betrayal of the Democratic Party. Her narrative challenges the efficacy of a two-party system, advocating for political independence and urging Americans to prioritize personal values over party allegiance. The memoir has landed with a thud when it comes to Jean-Pierre's ex-co-workers. My suggestion for Karine Jean-Pierre: the cover of this book, at least the one that was teased today or yesterday, is a picture of the White House with a cracked glass. You know, it's, oh no, something's wrong here. Another suggestion, all right? Take it or leave it. Karine Jean-Pierre doing the I think you should leave hot dog man meme where she's wearing a hot dog suit and you rename the book, We're All Trying to Find the People Who Did This. I actually, in all the books that I have read about the 2024 election, Fight, Revenge, Original Sin, Unprecedented, have been kind of surprised that nobody took a blowtorch to Karine Jean-Pierre. And part of that you can understand. She wasn't part of the campaign. She was part of the White House. But still, Original Sin, that's a book about the cover-up within the White House. And there was nobody who was more of a Baghdad Bob to cover up that lie than Karine Jean-Pierre. She went out there and said what she was told to say with a straight face every single day during the first time she took the podium, all the way through when the wheels were wobbly. The Democratic machine laundered the term cheap fakes through the Washington Post. Karine Jean-Pierre ran with it. And now, with no other public come to Jesus moment, she didn't quit the administration. She didn't say afterward, oh my God, I really regret some of the things that I said up there on that podium. No. She went out and sold a book. Sold a book where now she's left the Democratic Party. Mary Catherine Ham, who's been on this show, says on Twitter, this is a no-brainer. for the Democrats because there's a lot of off-the-record sources trashing Karine Jean-Pierre, who used to work in the Biden administration, to Axios' Alex Thompson, who wrote Original Sin. Mary Catherine Ham says, put your name on it. Come on, guys, it's Karine Jean-Pierre. You can stomach the idea that she'll hate you forever. You can take a bat to this woman who has the unmitigated gall to pull a move like this. Well, the one thing I would say to Mary Catherine, who's an exceptional pundit on the right, this is a great test case because there's no doubt that everybody involved in the Biden administration hates her now. Biden world hates her. I'll bet you Kamala world hates her. And yet she is triple charm protected on the left. Regardless of the person that is inside, she is triple charm protected. She is a black gay woman. Boom, boom, boom. 3 force fields around her. And so we're going to find out. Does the Democratic Party, aside from Bill Maher, have somebody that will just put their name on saying, hey, you're ridiculous, Karine. You are a ridiculous human being. We are all a part of this and we all have to wear the stink. And you more than ever, because you're the person who was in front of the podium. You don't take the job of being behind the podium. You don't take the job of being the person who says the words unless you are going to own the words. Let's swing on over to New York. A debate last night or on Wednesday night rather, with the candidates for New York City mayor. And the big question is all about Zohran Mamdani. He is a young, progressive, socialist candidate for mayor. And he would probably just be a curiosity for the online left if Andrew Cuomo weren't running an absolute dog bleep performance. This guy is a tired husk of his former self. You can tell he thinks that mayor is a huge step down from governor. In fact, he probably in his heart of hearts believes he should just be president. This is slumming it. Everyone should just give him this job because it very clearly belongs to him. They should be honored that Andrew Cuomo wants to be the mayor, wants to put on a hazmat suit and go to Gracie Mansion. Gross. But the question on the left is, would some of the left luminaries support Zohran? And indeed, a big piece fell this morning on Thursday. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez endorsing Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani for NYC mayor, signaling a major effort to unify progressives against Governor Andrew Cuomo. In an interview with the New York Times, Ocasio-Cortez praised Mamdani's ability to build a strong working-class coalition and urged voters to rally behind him in the final weeks before the June 24th Democratic primary. Cuomo currently leads in the polls, but it's been tightening. The endorsement is a strategic push to consolidate support and prevent a Cuomo comeback, positioning Mamdani as the left's best hope to win the nomination. And he is, by the numbers, I think he is running a very good campaign, for the record. From what I have seen of it, his ads are crisp. He is telling a consistent story. He is providing a young, fresh, exciting face that is enough to excite the true progressive believers, but paint over some of the scary scaries that people might think of progressive socialism, right? He's like, this isn't a rip the throats out of the rich stuff. It's like, I'm going to freeze the rent because you deserve it. Okay. All right. That's how you sell that kind of thing. AOC is not apparently going to do a big event with Zohran. So there was a line in the sand there. The next question would be, can they close the gap even further? The Mamdani camp. Very online. Again, very good. Am I going to go to New York City? I don't know if I can. We'll see. We'll see if I can go up. I'd like to see a Mamdani event. I would like to see a Mamdani event. I'd like to see a Cuomo event because I think one would be filled with a lot of energy, and I think one would be a funeral dirge. Now, that doesn't mean that Cuomo can't win. Again, if Cuomo were alive, I don't think this is close. The story of this election, in my opinion, is Cuomo blowing it more than, Zohran is outkicking his coverage. He's doing better than he should. His campaign is being run very well. He is a promising young politician, but he shouldn't be this close with Cuomo. A reminder also that part of this is the ranked choice voting. And the only reason why Zohran might beat Cuomo is because enough people that won't vote for him first rank him high enough. Certainly rank him above Cuomo. All right. That's your update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com, where you need to go get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. And now, back to Kevin. Let's get back to the Peterson side of it.
Yeah.
Because weirdly, I see the same kind of cultural worth for Jordan Peterson as I saw for Anthony Fauci. Hear me out.
Yeah.
When the lockdowns happen,
This is a hot
Fauci
take.
becomes a big part of our media lives, right?
Yeah.
I thought that his greatest worth to our culture is in a time of great fear and chaos, he seemed to be a calming, older Italian man that could eloquently explain why you should wash your hands more. And I was like, you want to know what? That's great. It's great to just have this calming presence. There's a lot of politics in the background. There's a lot of fear in the background. There's a lot of we don't know. All of a sudden, you're juggling a lot of things in your personal life because of these mitigation efforts that we're taking. If we'll all be better if we wash our hands, just in general, right? Like, it's just a good thing to do. And this older Italian man is doing a good job. Now, the more you learn about it, the more you see kind of where Fauci is in terms of, the world of NIH and funding, and then, how much the line in the sand when it came to vaccines comes in. Far more, when we go past where I had prescribed his greatest cultural worth, very problematic. It falls apart very quickly.
Tortured
Jordan
beagles.
Peterson, for him at the height of his powers, and if you haven't read Kevin's piece on this, and we did the feature story audio production of it, Jordan Peterson's greatest worth was a guy who could provide intellectual underpinnings for why you should clean your room every day.
Yeah.
You should probably clean your room every day. Your mental health will feel better if you clean your room every day. These basic kind of elements that I think your piece did a great job of explaining. Jordan Peterson's advice wasn't revolutionary. What was revolutionary was the audience that was flocking to it. A lost generation of often young men who just needed somebody to have this sort of no nonsense, wholesome sort of throwback, stern father like telling to them that was the fascinating thing. But when you get beyond that with Peterson, it gets problematic. Things start to fall apart because I don't think that he's a great thinker. I think that he's a drama kid that read a few books that if you just are there looking at him at the right light, you're like, oh, that guy told me to clean my room. I should probably clean my room. But when you start to look to him for theology or for moral philosophy beyond a certain level, I think it very much falls apart. Nor do I think that he's necessarily a great scholar, and that's where he's been clowned recently.
Yeah, and it's also it's the fallacy. You realize this very quickly with Peterson. He talks about a lot of subjects, and when you don't know the subject, you're like, "Wow, this guy's brilliant." But when you know the subject, you're like, "Well, that's just wrong. That's not true. He just made it up." But he said it with the same, finger twirling certainty that he talks about things I don't know about, and I'm like, "This guy is an expert." So, there's a lot of, I think everybody or most people have turned on him just because he's also sort of revealed this like cowardice, and he's shown a lot of like intellectual vulnerabilities that are, pretty rookie. And, I'm not saying that I could do what he does by any means. It's, it's really, he is an NFL quarterback, So he is on the field for a reason, but I just don't think that he will ultimately be like good for any of us. Like, I think we can all take like, okay, I'm going to wash my hands before I clean the bed or like make the bed. You know, those lessons are good. Those are good things. But yeah, the tangle that came out of his just, I want to use the word like maelstrom, but we get into a mixed metaphor. But I think that he sort of revealed himself to be something that was, I think there are elements of fraud, intellectual fraud.
Let me ask you the general question, because part of our modern world is that we have this Circus Maximus thing that we like to put our, would-be intellectuals through. And that's part of the reason why we're talking about the Jordan Peterson thing, is that he did one of these YouTube videos where it's, one Christian versus 20 atheists. Oh. And so you just have all these people that are running to go debate things. And so this happens with various different topics. Oftentimes they're culture war topics. And Jordan Peterson, I don't even know. I mean, he's, I guess, said he's a Christian. I don't know if he's not a particularly known for his theological discussion. I would have liked to have had somebody that had a little bit more. I would love to see you do that more than I would have liked to see a Jordan Peterson do that. But what do you think of those videos? Like what is it? What is the desire for debate is greater than ever, which I intellectually kind of want to say, all right, there's something good about that. Even if it's dumb, a lot of debate is dumb. A lot of debate is kind of useless, even when it's more polite. So is a lot of impolite debate bad? But then again, like there's been times where I've been invited on shows like that, and I've done like one or two of them on Twitch, and they were things that made me want to put a drill bit in my eyeball.
Yeah, this is not one of them. This is not one of those topics. A discussion between atheists and a believer, and that's what that video is where I was finally like, I'm done with Peterson. Like, he revealed himself, because this guy's made a lot of money off of Bible analysis. He's gone out and talked about the Bible to audiences. Yeah, and in that interview, he was the snotty child. He was the one. He was the reason that kid was. I mean, that kid was doing the right thing, and what Peterson should have done, because it is very, very important for there to be open and honest conversations between atheists and believers. That is a productive conversation that society needs, and both sides can learn a lot from each other. And for the Christian, his job is to show what a Christian should be, and to come to an atheist humbly, have a dialogue, be open-minded about what they have to say, and respond with love. Yeah, I mean, that's the most important part. So when you get haughty and then start to literally denying Christ in a debate called a Christian versus 10 atheists. I mean, that is slippery, man. That is like, That's what I was
Well, and
talking
he was
about
just
with cowardice.
clowned relentlessly for his rhetorical defenses and that was the joke earlier of like, well, what do you mean by is? What do you mean by when? What do you mean by belief or God? And it's like, okay, like
that's what con artists do. Like you should be
no con artists are usually better. I mean, like con artists are usually someone that you want to
Exactly.
like buy into. They're giving you empty space so you can write your own story. This is just like the worst conversation you've gotten into at a Barnes and Nobles. Like it's just a bad time on so many different levels. I really those videos, full of disclosure, are not my thing, and so I mostly just saw it based on the fact that people were dumping on Peterson, and I found him to be an interesting figure really ever since we worked on the feature story thing together. But it's, I don't know, maybe he was always due for this, because as much as I'm like, oh, he found this audience of people that were like, oh, maybe you should make your bed more often and you should take more responsibility for yourself. That wasn't the reason why he was famous. He wasn't famous because he wrote a self-help book. The self-help book became famous because he entered into the culture war battle about gender transition and pronouns. Like that's why he was famous. So he was always going to live and die by the culture war, the culture war sword. And now I think he's kind of run out of topics that he is on the right side of the 80-20 on. And he's kind of, he's a bit of a drama queen. He's annoying. Maybe it's just one of those things where the more people have gotten to see him, the less they like him.
Yeah. I mean, just look at where anybody, like really good impressions of Peterson are a dime a dozen now, because the template has been, it's been spread, and it's like, okay, this guy like fairly often does not know what he's talking about. But and there's a like a magician's element. And I remember, when I was reporting on that story, when I was interviewing him and going to a lot of Peterson events, the thing that people wanted to know constantly is, do you believe in God? And what is God? And he could never answer that question. He brought in Jung, he brought in Dostoevsky, he did all the usual tricks. And it was like, even when people are like, okay, this is a yes or no question, he couldn't do it. And I don't know why. I don't know why he wasn't able to answer that question. I think early on it was, okay, this guy wants to like preserve something that's very private to him. But it turns out that's not it. Even if something's very private, you don't deny it when you're talking to an atheist. Like that's rule number one. You like, if there's any situation where you can say yes or no, that's the one you say, yes, I do. I am a believer in God. But he just gave all these high flown, nonsensical explanations, brought up the dominance hierarchy. And, if you think about the dominance hierarchy, God is the dominance hierarchy, which is like about as clear an answer I ever encountered from him. I don't think that's productive. And I think that's where he collapsed as not just a conservative intellectual, which is another label that he just denied constantly. Yeah. Well, and maybe that feeds into the cycle that I described at the beginning about if you're conservative, you have to deny that you're intellectual. But I don't think that's what it was, because when I was reporting on him, if he heard that there was a New York Times reporter in there, knowing full well that person was there to just
trash him.
Oh, flamethrower. And in the most disingenuous possible way, he would run to them every time. And that is so inauthentic. That's like, because I was there like sincerely trying to understand him, trying to understand what motivates him, who he really is. I was trying to do, if he were authentic and presented with hit piece or guy who wants to really understand me, but he writes for conservative media, if he were the real deal, he would go with the
But
latter.
this gets us into the other cornerstone of conservative media, which is opposition.
Yes.
Conservative media is opposition media. And the reason why conservative figures will run to the New York Times before they talk to anybody on their own side is because they know they will always be rewarded for getting dumped on by the New York Times, because it will unite the tribe. And it will say, well, look at this unfair, absolute hit piece, blah, 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 blah. And they know that that liberal media or mainstream media can be counted on to dump on them. And they will replenish the well of what, you can call it, I would say oppositional, because I don't think that it's universal victimhood. But victimhood is often a permeating element of this,
Big
where the predicate for all conservative media is they lied. Here's what really is true. That you can put that in front of every headline on The Blaze, in front of every headline on Fox News, in front of every headline, blah, 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 blah. But when you look at that framing, that is just woven into the DNA of conservative media. Every titan, Buckley knew it, Limbaugh knew it, go back to the mass media era, that this was always true. And I think oftentimes as conservatives are now kind of building their own power structure, and maybe it's good that they are entirely self-sufficient and that they are, just talking and farming their own dirt to make their own audience, because eventually that fort will become a city and that city will become a metropolis. But it's hard to shed that. And yeah. I think that is what, from people that I have heard inside of the conservative machine, it's rough when you're like, hey, I am here to tell you a fair story. And they're like, yeah. Cool, kid. Can I please go get absolutely destroyed by Vanity Fair right now? It's like, oh, really? Like, you want another piece that's like Jordan Peterson, the manipulative mastermind of angry young men? It's like, yeah, no, I love that. It's actually great for me. It's amazing for my business. Your thing is nice. I'll be fine. I can actually send it to my family and they'll like it, but that doesn't pay the bills.
Definitely. And there are parts of that I have no problem with. And I get it. Like, and I'll give you just a little story. I got a ton of Blaze stories that I'll share over, like, very funny, interesting stuff. But I remember, at one of the events at the Blaze where Glenn Beck was there, and he had a museum, and it was about like the history of slavery from a very, he has so many artifacts, so many historical objects. And so I brought a friend with me. He was actually a mentor, and he wrote for Rolling Stone. Yeah. And I brought him along and just thought, hey, this is kind of a cool thing to witness. I didn't realize he was like recording. He had the recorder going the entire time.
Really?
And yeah. Like nonstop on the car ride there and everything.
Wow.
Without telling me, this is a mentor. Like,
that's a no for the record.
Yeah, that's not. It's just, he knew the technicalities of it. You don't need permission in Texas from the person you're recording. So whatever.
Journalistically, that's
not cool.
That's not cool. No.
So he would not.
You would not. That is not taught in J school.
Well, that's the ironic part. He was one of my teachers in J school. He's one of the, so there is an element of that where they teach, get the scoop however you can. And in this situation, he turned around and wrote about it. He wrote a story about it, and it was pretty nasty. And I went to Glenn, and I was like, okay, you're going to fire me, so I'll go ahead and put my head on the chopping block. And he's like, can you send me the story? Send him the story on Twitter. Retweet. And that's when I realized, like, okay, this is productive. This is sort of like the conversation between the Christian and the atheist. Yeah. Where, and there's some salesmanship in there, and I don't mind that. That's business. The problem that I found was like, just me looking around and be like, okay, let's do something about it. Let's like stop complaining about the mainstream media and let's try some of the things that they're doing. And maybe we can have a dialogue instead of this sort of whining. So, and it's like, we need to do original reporting. We need to pick up the phone and call people. We need to write. We need to consult surveys. We need to do all these different things that the New York Times and Washington Post all do. If we're going to criticize them, let's do something. And that just doesn't exist. And so that was always frustrating.
The conservative media is dominated by commentary.
Yeah.
It is all about like, let's react to the news. Even, I think some of the best conservative shows that I will listen to or right-leaning shows that I'll listen to, they're all like, the segment starts with, let me read you a story from a liberal outlet that I hate.
Yep.
Like that's how they all start. Anyway, this is a thing that's written in the New York Times. This is the thing. So it's this weird interplay of, I don't trust them ever. If they ever write about anybody that I agree with, they're awful. But also, let me trust their framework and reporting on this other thing that I am talking about.
Oh, and that's so easy to do. That's what bothered me about it. To like rely on something and then complain. I mean, that's like what a spoiled child does. Who when they like hate their parents and they're like, let me get the allowance early. Like it's just not. I didn't find that to be productive or genuine.
Yeah, and I don't know whether or not that's the role of conservative media. Like I ultimately do believe in the concept of mainstream media being something that might have a bias, but is generally trusted. Yeah. I think that ultimately that's the place to go. And that is the reason why I get sad about gigantic brands like the Washington Post or the New York Times that have become so ideologically and audience captured, to say nothing of the kind of internal drama that they have, to say nothing of the fact that the Washington Post is a, absolute money pit that Jeff Bezos can, should, and likely will just turn into an Amazon link farm at some point. So we can recoup some of the money that he spent. But I do believe that those outlets matter and they do need to gain general trust. You do need to have people there. And that's the other thing of the conservative media. The fact that all the interesting voices in conservative media run their own empires is, I think, bad. That there's nobody that has the New York Times column on the right that is pro-Trump. There's nobody that does that. Like all the conservatives in those outlets are never Trump guys. Yeah. So it's like, okay, but I think in another world, Ben Shapiro should have a Times column. Like Charlie Kirk should have a Washington Post column. Like these are the kinds of voices that they're on the right, but they need to be part of that stew for people to believe the other stuff that's in there, including a lot of the news reporting that, look, people get tired of me going into it, nitpicking and combing through this kind of stuff and reading it like I would be reading it as an editor. But those problems are exacerbated when there's nobody inside your room that you're afraid is going to write a column ripping your reporting.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I think, I totally agree with conservative media because they would do that. Just like Peterson sprinting towards the New York Times reporter. Yeah. Like Charlie Kirk would do a Washington Post column,
any of those people. Are you telling me that if the New York Times called Ben Shapiro and said, hey, we want once a week, we want you to write a column on whatever you want, he would run. I don't care what he's ever said about that place before. He would crawl over broken glass to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think if we go deeper, I think part of the problem is that conservative media has access to a portion of America that the New York Times, the New Yorker, especially some of the literary magazines,
Yeah.
they cannot reach. They cannot.
They won't. Yeah.
No, they won't do it. Their only connection to those sources is from the critiques by the conservative outlets that they reach.
Yes.
But among the media literate corporate media readers, they are willing to consult the original source or the primary source. So if you invite those voices into that space, that's just spreading the conservative media empire. So it's a tactical move, and it's one that I understand, but it's also like, okay, so you're kind of doing a similar version to what they're doing. You're complaining and then not doing anything about it because it's profitable for you. It's more profitable for you to complain than it is to like offer the actual perspective in the words of somebody who's in that position.
Yeah. And look, I can understand it. I can understand the economic model.
Yeah.
Because there was a time that my job was to wake up and steel myself to find a story and call 3 strangers that didn't want me to call them and then get angry phone messages back or not get called and have to work on something else and then write everything on deadline. And that was stressful and it sucked. And now I just get to look at headlines and say, I don't know, maybe the headline should be different. And this is a lot more profitable. It's a lot more fun for me. It's a lot more enriching. So I can understand hard work sucks. Hard work is bad. Going forward with a plan that might alienate an element of your audience is scary.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, hell, talk about 8 years ago with the Blaze. 8 years ago with the Blaze, Glenn was flirting with being a never Trump network, right? Like he was flirting. Yeah, he was flirting with having that be where things went. And then guess what? It didn't work. And I'm not here to impugn Glenn's journey throughout all of that, but I think it would be hard to say that if he was not going to basically make the Blaze the bulwark or make the Blaze the dispatch, then he continued to follow where his audience was. And that was on the Trump train. And so somebody that was very critical of Donald Trump now became somebody that was stumping for him, now became somebody for whom was putting the heft. And so that network followed.
What's interesting is in that never Trump journey towards, being a Trump, Glenn had when I was working for him at the time, he had a weekly phone call with Trump where Trump would just say, what are they saying? And I always admired that in Trump, that it was, he really does want to know, he is aware of the media coverage and all of that. Trump is an anomaly in the crisis of the modern conservative and in the so-called conservative intellectual. And I think part of that gets to the heart of one of the things we're talking about, which is the reactionary aspect of conservatives. And, I think your audience is going to know this, obviously, but there's a lot of misuse of the word reactionary to mean someone who reacts. But that's really, that's part of it, or that can be a strategy of being reactionary. But what we mean when we talk about it is the movement to impose a world that slows down in the face of constant progress. Yeah. So it's not so much, there is a reaction to that. You can argue that is a reaction, but it's also it's a reinstatement. And it's not, I think the progress is a reaction. Progress is a reaction to the way things were. The way they are. So a reactionary is okay, let's just let's slow down and think about this. And what we've seen recently is a movement, and this is the movement I was talking about when I said they're horrible people and with horrible ideas, is the neo-reactionary movement. It's really taking conservative media into some weird and potentially dangerous territory.
Define that for us.
The
neo-reactionary. Yeah.
Okay. So this is, like a lot of things, like a lot of cultural movements, this began in the academic environment, and it actually began on the left. So you have a guy, Nick Land is who I would attribute the beginning of this to. He's a philosopher in England, just like probably a genius. Studied with the left, the academic left, learned their language, read everything they read and comprehended it probably better than they did a lot of times. We're talking about postmodernism, particularly Gilles Deleuze, a French philosopher who anybody who's tried to read him knows it's tough. It's tough. And I won't pretend to know what he's talking about. But so Nick Land took those ideas and used them to expose the left, the academic left.
Gotcha.
And using their same language. And so from that becomes this critique of capitalism. Nick Land said, capitalism is what the left calls anything that hurts their feelings. So pretty inflammatory stuff. And he, one of the people he worked with is Curtis Yarvin. And
yes,
so Curtis Yarvin is like tricky, slippery, and they worked on this idea of like the dark enlightenment and accelerationism. We need to make cultural decay move faster so that, the right philosophy can emerge, which is a crude definition, but that's roughly what it is. So you have a lot of ideas like that, which are reactionary in the sense that they're like, okay, we need to get our values right. We need to remember Western values. But there's also the aspect of okay, well, progress is something that we have to acknowledge or we have to involve ourselves with. So let's use this progress against the people who think it's a good idea because we think it's a bad idea. And
so they want to accelerate the bad part about a progressive worldview, and I'm not talking about it specifically on the issues that a progressive would define, but rather a broad idea of progressive versus reactionary, is that if a progressive is accelerant toward the new, that if the new is bad for us, then it's you're hitting gas, but you're moving toward a cliff, right? And so at that point, the brakes, the reactionaries that are like, whoa, hold on, that's good. You want the brakes when you're headed toward a cliff. And so their point is no, we need to be heading toward this cliff as fast as possible. So we have more reactionaries that are saying we need to step on the brake and we need to stop it. And it's only then that they could probably even reshape some of the pathway that they have already trod.
Yes. And within that metaphor, I think that they also consider the acceleration, okay, if we go fast enough, maybe there's a cliff on the other side and we can land our little dirt bike over there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I think guys like Curtis Yarvin and I forget his name right now, but the Russian philosopher we've talked about before.
Yeah.
They're
Dugan.
Yeah. They are, I don't know, it's tricky because they're part of meme culture, deeply part of meme culture.
Yeah.
And, then you get this. So basically what's happening in new conservative media is that you have this postmodern movement happening to a group of people who insist they know what postmodernism is, but have no idea. They can't define it. It's a boogeyman, but guys like Nick Land and Curtis Yarvin, they can define it. They do know the tenets of postmodernism. And with Yarvin, he's another one. I'm not going to pretend to fully understand his ideas, but there is this move, and it's mostly the Hillsdale guys. It's a movement from Hillsdale of people who are following in that vein, the Yarvin vein, the Nick Land vein of like, let's just destroy things. Let's accelerate through the wall that's in front of the cliff. And that they are producing some like really nasty ideas. And I was deeply embedded in that. And I was in those meetings. I was,
Well, give us an example, like on the culture war side of an idea that you're talking about that spawns from this philosophy.
That's a good question. It's probably the transgender discussion. And
their position would be that we need to be focusing more on it, if not promoting it, because it's going to have a backlash.
Making sure the flames are high and they remain high.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then like a lot of trolling.
So even if there's not an 80-20 example that bolsters their cause, then find the 60-40 example. Find maybe the 40-60 the other way that you can look at in a certain way that kind of gets people still riled up about it, because the point is this campaign needs to stay on the march as opposed to whether or not it is righteous.
Yeah, turn it up. Keep turning it up. If it's not there, obviously you don't manufacture it. It is a legitimate issue that we're all discussing. But and that's just an example. But I think in a more abstract sense, the problem I found was like, you guys said you were interested in artistry and creativity and like the freedom to experiment and trying new things. I thought when I first encountered them, I thought, oh man, other settlers have arrived in this in this area that I staked out 7 years ago. And it was like, I thought they were like-minded at first, but the more I was around them, I was like,
it got dark. It got dark and militant.
It got dark and militant. Yeah. That was like, all about it. Those were discussions that we were having the entire time that I was there. And this sort of, it was like, oh, this is just strictly political. And it's inside the Trojan horse of culture as a way to inflame, antagonize, and troll the culture. Yeah. Instead of looking for common ground.
Enrichment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like what is the point of having a foothold in culture unless we're going to put an idea out that flowers, that inspires, that makes people's lives better through, conversation or art. And instead it's like, no, the battle is about the battle. That's it. There's no peacetime. There's no moment where we beat our swords into plowshares. We are only there to stab each other. And there's no ground that we don't own that shouldn't be ours. And that is frustrating. It's frustrating because we do come from a combative age. I don't think that anybody would argue, including some of the scariest stuff that happens. There seems to be more of a porous line than ever for people to get inflamed emotionally. And you would hope that in a world of infinite possibilities that we exist on the internet, that there could be other things that we could get excited about, that would possibly move the ball forward culturally. But that is fascinating. Kevin, I'm sure that these are the kind of things that you are going to be talking about quite a bit on your Substack. Where can people find it?
Substack. The Substack is titled Free Drift. I'll put it in my Twitter bio tomorrow. By Friday, the piece that will be out is about Simone Weil, the French philosopher, and it kind of relates to this discussion actually. Mm-hmm. So it's where, and I get to be as weird as I want. So I'm finally getting to do what I want to do.
Awesome, man. Kevin Ryan, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to talk to you, brother.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. Our producer is Will Saddleberg. You can send me an email, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Follow, find, and share video clips of the show. TikTok, Justin R. Young. YouTube is Politics. We have shorts there, and we have the full video. You want to see me? You want to see me talk? Look, guys, come on. I used to have such a sweet deal with this show. I only ever wanted it to be audio. Even though I'm this freaking gorgeous. I got this hair, right? I wanted to keep it from you guys because I wanted to be that lazy. I just wanted to wander into my booth in my office and record the podcast in my little sweaty booth. I loved it. But no, the future of all of this is video. So we got to do video. And so now we're doing video. So please, for the love of cheese, go watch it. Politics. I should probably upload it to Spotify too. They're doing video now too. Anyway. Hit me with a one-time donation, paypal.me/payjury. You want to know what? Question of the day. Answer me with $1. No. You want a philosophical question? Is the journey the destination? Give me your thoughts by sending me $1 and putting this in the notes. PayPal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. And send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas, 78715. The only way you can get our bonus content is takepoliticsseriously.com. $12 a month. It's $3 a week. Look, 2 bonus episodes each and every week. If you care about this kind of stuff. And look, the Trump machine keeps going. We're going. It's rolling. You need the episodes in the middle between the other 2 episodes. I do 2 episodes a week. You want 2 extra ones? Come on. What are we doing? TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Or you can sign up annually. And that is $99 for the entire GD year. That's 150 episodes of PX3 for under $100. But the only way that you get your name read at the end of this show is by signing up for our, we got to just do a name thing. We got to do a definitive name thing. Maybe I should just go live with everybody and we'll figure it out. It's the freaky deaky founding tier. So somebody actually pointed out, they're like, look, it can't be the founding tier because you can join whenever you want. So it's got to be something else. I love you guys. It's the people that get their name right at the end of the show. L3PO, P-Paw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes. Oh yeah, it's Adam, Neil, AB Puppy, Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will, The Borge B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, a dog named Checkers, Gloria, Jerry, Trucker, John, Berkeley, Stephen, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read at the end of this show? One place to do it, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. We will be back next week. Who knows what fresh hell DC has for us. But we will whistle into the gaping, flaming wall with a song on our lips. Till then, this is your old pal, Justin Robert Young, saying some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, still more discuss politics. This is the only show that dares discuss. Three.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show Audio.